The night the Great Lakes trod to swallow Dennis Hale, he was wearing only his boxer shorts, a thin life jacket, and a grim prayer. It was November 29, 1966, and the SS Daniel J. Morrell, a titan of the American industrial age, a straight-decked bulk freighter over 600 feet long, was being slowly, inexorably torn to pieces beneath him. Outside, the blizzard was a blinding white hurricane, the worst November gale Lake Huron had seen in 20 years. The wind, howling a sound like 1,000 angry souls, was whipping the waves into murderous 30-foot peaks that crashed over the towering deck, shaking the ship with blows heavy enough to stun a buffalo. Dennis, a young wheelsman, just 26 years old, had been woken from a fitful sleep in his bunk by a sound that defied comprehension. The shriek of rending steel, a monstrous high-pitched scream that cut through the engine's thrum and the storm's roar. He scrambled out onto the deck, barefoot, the raw steel chilling his skin instantly. The air was a mixture of sleet and frozen spray, but the cold that seized him was deeper than the weather. It was the primordial chill of death. He looked toward the bow, straining his eyes against the driving snow. He saw it. He saw the impossible. The Morrell had broken in half. Not just damaged, the immense vessel, built with hundreds of thousands of tons of Ohio steel, was folding like a cheap toy. The colossal bow section, with the pilot house and all the officers still on it, was rising up, a dark silhouette against the white storm, its searchlight piercing the blizzard like a ghostly, accusing eye. It was separating from the stern where Dennis stood, and as the two halves drifted apart on the surging water, a terrifying, chasm-like gap opened between them, churning white water mixed with black iron ore dust. In that instant, Dennis saw his captain, Captain Edward J. Massey, standing on the rising bow, framed in the light, silhouetted against the dark sky. The captain's eyes, even from that distance, seemed to lock with his, conveying a mute terror and a final shared comprehension. This was it. The unsinkable was sinking. A brutal wave slammed into the stern. Dennis was flung across the deck. When he got to his feet, the life raft, the ship's only hope, was dangling crazily from its davits. He and 3 other men managed to wrestle it free just as the stern section, suddenly relieved of the bow's weight, shuddered one last awful time. Then, with a sound like a train wreck echoing under the water, the stern plunged. Dennis was thrown into the abyss. He fought his way up through the icy blackness, spitting water and bile, his lungs screaming. When he surfaced, he was alone, clinging to a rubber life raft barely large enough for a coffin, bobbing in water that was 34 degrees Fahrenheit, less than 1 degree Celsius. The ship was gone. All 29 other men of the crew were gone. Above him, the blizzard raged. The waves, the freshwater seas of the Great Lakes, were the size of houses, and they were intent on sweeping him away. For the next 38 hours, Dennis Hale was adrift on Lake Huron, fighting a battle against hypothermia, hallucination, and the horrifying truth of his complete solitude. This was not the ocean. This was the Great Lakes, a place of hidden depths, sudden violent storms, and a history littered with the wrecks of over 6,000 vessels, a true ghost fleet lying in wait. And he was now just another statistic waiting to be claimed. This is the true story of the SS Daniel J. Morrell, the most mysterious Great Lakes disaster of the modern era, the astonishing ordeal of the only man who saw the ship break in half and lived to tell of it, and the dark history of the American steel and shipping dynasties who sacrificed men for the sake of getting the iron ore home. The historical narrative will be divided into three main parts, interweaving the personal story of Dennis Hale with the larger, fascinating history of Great Lakes industrialism and naval architecture. Part 1. The Making of a Titan and the Fateful Voyage. This section focuses on historical context, the rise of Great Lakes shipping, the life of a Laker crewman, and the final journey of the Morrell. 1. The Freshwater Sea, a history of Lake Huron. The rise of iron ore, a look at the discovery of massive iron ore deposits in the Mesabi Range, Minnesota, and the need for colossal ships to feed the steel mills of the East, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Cleveland. The first Titans, the design and construction of the 600-foot freighters in the early 20th century, specifically the Lakers design, long, narrow, and shallow drafted for the locks. The name, a chapter dedicated to the ship's namesake, Daniel J. Morrell, a key figure in the Cambria Iron Company and the American industrial machine, connecting the ship's fate to the nation's economic engine. 2. The Morrell and the Men. Birth of a relic. The Morrell was launched in 1906, detailing its lifespan, the fact that it was an aging vintage ship in 1966, and the stresses of 60 years of use. Life below deck, introducing the crew, focusing on Dennis Hale, his background in Ashtabula, Ohio, his reasons for sailing the lakes, and the tight-knit, dangerous subculture of the freightermen. The cargo and the clock, the relentless pressure of the final late-season runs, the money runs, to haul one last load of iron ore before the winter freeze shut down navigation. 3. The storm gathers. Departure. The Morrell leaves Taconite Harbor, Minnesota, fully loaded with 11,000 tons of taconite pellets. The forecast. Tracking the development of the November Witch, the brutal, fast-developing winter gale that struck the lakes, the historical fact that the forecast was severely underestimated. A fateful encounter, detailing the Morrell's movements, including the fact that it was traveling in convoy with its sister ship, the SS Edward Y. Townsend, highlighting the eerie synchronization of their fate. Part 2. The 38 Hours. This section is the core of the survival narrative, focusing on Dennis Hale's ordeal, interwoven with the terrifying fact-based engineering failure. 4. The Rending. The Breakup, a detailed, visceral recreation of the night of November 29, 1966. The sound of the steel failing, the flash of the separation, and the desperate, disorganized attempt to launch the life raft. The engineering horror, an interlude explaining the Morrell's structural failure, known in marine engineering as hogging and sagging stress. The ship, loaded down with heavy ore, essentially flexed in the massive waves until the brittle, cold steel simply snapped at a weak point. The historical record confirms this two-piece break. 5. Alone on the life raft. The first night, Dennis's battle with hypothermia, the critical realization that he only had his boxer shorts and a life jacket, his companions on the raft briefly and their quick succumbing to the cold, the horrifying detail of having to push his dead crewmates off the raft to keep it afloat, a true historical detail of his account. The hallucinations, the onset of severe hypothermia, the shakes cease, replaced by a false, sleepy warmth. His mind begins to play tricks, seeing lights, hearing phantom voices, and believing he's talking to his dead crewmates. This is medically and psychologically accurate for extreme cold exposure. 6. The Day of Despair. The search, following the timeline of the official U.S. Coast Guard search, the delay in reporting the Morrell missing, and the critical hours lost. The Coast Guard's struggle to search in the unprecedented storm. The discovery, the historical tragedy of the SS Edward Y. Townsend, the Morrell's sister ship, also vanishing in the same storm, multiplying the disaster and confusing the search efforts. The vigil, Dennis's desperate, waning hope as ships and planes pass near him, but fail to spot the small ice-encrusted raft. His spiritual and mental struggle, the classic survival trope of giving up versus the instinct to live. Part 3. Aftermath and the Ghost Fleet Legacy. This section deals with the rescue, the investigation, and the lasting historical and cultural impact of the disaster on American shipping. 7. The miracle of daybreak. The rescue, the moment of discovery, the Coast Guard helicopter Rescue 1550 spotting the small orange speck of the raft covered in a sheet of ice, the nearly impossible task of hoisting a hypothermic, non-responsive man from a wildly pitching raft. The recovery, Dennis's fight for life in the hospital, the physiological effects of being frozen for 38 hours, the medical marvel of his survival. The dead, the eventual discovery of bodies and wreckage confirming